So here I am, terrible person that I am. I lie, I steal, I cheat. But then I go to a class on Buddhism, I learn about karma, and I say, okay, no more of this. I'm just going to do good actions. All right, so from now on, all I'm going to do is good actions. Some of them will have effect immediately, some of them further in the future, but all good results. So why do bad things happen to good people? You look at someone like this, that all they do is good actions. Can you see why bad things happen to good people?
Things in the past that, sorry.
Because you do things in the past that still haven't come to fruition yet, so the conditions aren't in place yet for whatever those seeds that you reaped in the past to sort of come to fruition now in the present.
Right.
Karma from much longer ago, even from previous lifetimes that you might not realize.
Possibly. Right. So if I did negative actions here, some of them may take effect now, but some of them are taking effect at the same time. Right? So in this situation, I might be experiencing really bad things that are results of previous causes. Right? So we have causes and we have effects. Even though what I'm doing right now has not changed my present situation. It actually can. Right? By thinking that, okay, well, I'm doing good works, I'm volunteering, I'm doing all these things, doesn't mean that I'm now protected from getting cancer because I smoked for 20 years and things, but right? It doesn't mean that I'm protected from all those past actions. Right? Once the conditions are there, I'm going to experience those effects. Right? So in this moment, in this time here, this is what we call the present moment, we can't affect the past actions. We can't affect what's happened in the past. All we can do is create causes that will result in a better future. Right? So this is why when we talk about karma, we're not talking about changing the past. Right? We're talking about setting the conditions right for the future. Yeah.
Can the effects of bad karma be weakened by your actions now? Like,
Good question.
in some way? Or not nullified, but lessened?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, does anyone have an answer for that, by the way? Would you like to provide it before I go?
That would depend on the conditions.
Thank you. What about it? Ken?
But,
Can you say more?
well, that's it. It just depends.
So remember we talked about conditions last week, right? We talked about a plant, right? So in order for a seed to turn into a plant, you have to have water, you have to have soil, you have to have sunlight, you have to have fertilizer, all these things, right? And if any of those things aren't present, then the seed doesn't sprout. So it's the same thing with karma, right? That if for these effects to happen, for the effect to actually manifest, then the right conditions have to be there. Right? So the more negative actions you continue, the more negative habits you continue, the more likely it is that the conditions are going to be right for that negative effect to manifest. Right? But if you're just doing positive actions, then you're not creating the right conditions for that negative action to come about, to bear fruit. Right? So in that way, you can kind of defer the effects. Right? And it's kind of like, you can never really eliminate it, because if you started doing all the things that created the conditions for that to take effect again, it would. But you can kind of change the conditions so that it manifests and it's not as bad, or it doesn't come into effect at all. Right? Until we attain Buddhahood, in which case it's all kind of canceled out. Right?
There's a simile that our venerable master Xingyin used. Salt is like bad habits, water, good habits. So if you put a teaspoon of salt in a glass of water, can you taste it? can you taste the salt? If you put the same teaspoon of salt in an ocean, can you taste the salt?
Because remember, like, all the conditions that we're living in right now, like, we're living in sort of conditions that were created by all past actions. Right, so if our actions can be, more of our actions are good, so we have kind of more pure water, right, then it doesn't, the effects aren't as strong. Right, but they're still there, they still have that potential. Okay? Please, microphone, please.
I just have a question regarding karma, because I remember in one of the previous classes, it was mentioned that if you apologize for something that you've done wrong in the past, that it can cancel out your karma, something like that was said, for bad karma. And I don't really understand how that would work, because, okay, like, what if it's something bad, like you accidentally cut in line in front of someone, then yeah, okay, but like, what if it's something really bad, like you kill someone and you're sorry for it, and the murderer like apologizes to the family? Does that mean that that cancels out that bad karma? Like, can you cancel out bad karma by apologizing? That's just something I'm not really clear about.
So, based on what I've said, what do you think? So what is the condition, is the action of killing someone, is an easy question. I like to ask easy questions to you guys. Positive or negative karma? Is the act of apologizing for doing that positive or negative karma? Right. Like, if you're actually genuinely sorry. Right, then that's actually, I would say, like, that action at that time is a positive one. Right? Are they evil? No. So do they cancel each other out? Not really, right? But it helps. Right? And it's kind of like the difference, like, if I, let's use an easier example. If you swat a cockroach or a mosquito, right? So if I see it and I swat it, that's killing, it's negative karma, we would say, right? If I then say, ha, that was a good one. Gotcha, sucker. Right, so if I'm really glad about it, positive or negative?
A little more negative.
And if I say, I'm sorry, I lost my temper, or I had to do it, or whatever, genuinely sorry, genuinely regret, positive. Right? And what does that do for the future? What happens the next time I see a cockroach? Maybe I kill it. Maybe I do. But am I as likely to repeat the negative action? If I kill someone and I'm genuinely remorseful, am I as likely to kill someone again? So the long-term effect is better. So it doesn't erase the original action, it doesn't erase the original cause, right? But it does help in terms of creating the conditions for positive actions in the future. Make sense? Okay. And there's, I mean, especially for people new to cause and effect, dependent origination, karma, etc., there's kind of this tendency to kind of try to simplify it to say, okay, well, you know, it's some kind of like scorecard, where it's kind of like, okay, well, you know, it's a tally. So like, you know, if I check this off, then I get to cross this off, and like it all cancels each other out. All that's really important is that I'm more on the positive side by the time I'm finished. And of course, there is no scorecard, right? There is no tally. It's just life, right? It's a life that we're experiencing, and we need to be aware of it, be aware of the consequences of what we do, right? And all that comes from realizing that causes precede effects. Right? Because as soon as we forget that, then we lose everything about karma, we lose everything about understanding how the world works. And so even though it seems very simple, we tend not to keep it in our minds nearly enough. You agree? Okay. Let's do the next one. Temporary appearances depend on causes and conditions. So can we have another volunteer? Read this section.
phenomena are temporary. From the above principle, we know that all phenomena do not arise by themselves, but arise due to causes and conditions. In the same way, all phenomena cease due to causes and conditions. Because of this, all phenomena merely appear temporarily and do not have any substantial existence of their own. As they have no substantial experience, phenomena appear when the right conditions arise and disappear when the right conditions cease. This is the meaning of the Buddha's saying, all things arise from dependent origination. All things, nature is emptiness.
Thank you. Is that actually the right section?
Yes.
There's some different translations, so. Okay. Second. So, hopefully you're following along. In whatever version you have. Different versions, different translations, that's okay. So, we've talked a lot about how things arise, how phenomena arise from causes and conditions. Right, we haven't talked about sort of as much about how things cease. Right, that things arise, they also cease due to causes and conditions. So, and this is kind of like the other side of the coin. Right, that whatever arises, right, so whatever causes we have, they produce effects. Whatever effects those are, they're not permanent. Right, because once we have an effect manifest, remember it's also a cause, remember there's also changing conditions. Right, so whatever exists, whatever comes into being, it only exists long enough. But while the conditions that support it are there. Right? So if I'm hungry, right? So one of the conditions of me being hungry is that I haven't had any food. As soon as I go eat, that condition is no longer there, I no longer feel hungry. Right? So it arises, it passes with conditions. Right? So the effect is this mental feeling of hunger. Right? The condition is not having food in my stomach, right? Not having enough, glucose in my blood, right, etc. I need fuel. So as soon as I have that, the feeling of hunger goes away. The conditions to support it are no longer there. Having light in this room. Why are these lights on?
Somebody press the button.
Okay. Laura, could you turn the lights off? No lights. Turn back on. What other conditions are there? So one of them is having a switch, right? And that switch actually completes a circuit, right? So if you turn a light off, you're actually interrupting the circuit. Turn it back on, you're completing the circuit, and the electricity gets to the bulbs. So think about what else has to happen for these lights to be on. What other conditions are there? Yeah.
To pay a bill.
Power bill has to be paid. Right? So if we don't pay the power bill, the switch gets turned off somewhere else. What else?
Has to be good.
Sorry?
Bulb has to be good.
The bulb has to be in operating condition.
Source of electricity.
Has to be a source of electricity. Think about that. Think about how unlikely it is that there would be a source of electricity.
Depending on where you live, is it coming from a coal plant, hydro plant, and who built it, how they built it, how far away it is?
Think about Niagara Falls, right? How likely is it that Niagara Falls would ever exist? How likely is it that we would figure out how to harness electricity and figure out how to use it? Right, and we would have like Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison and those guys figure out alternating current and figure out how to build all these devices, the investment that had to go into building the power grid, right? All these people using so much power in our province, right? And everyone being supplied without interruption. Right, so all of those conditions. Think how fragile that is. Right, if you take any one of those conditions and you turn them off, you take them away, then the lights are on. No more power. No more heat, no more air conditioning. All these things are gone by just changing one condition. So why do we think things are stable, things are permanent? Think about all the processes that are going on in our bodies. Right, all the chemical reactions that have to happen every second to keep us alive. Right, think about breathing. Think about our hearts. You can't say, oh, you know, I've been breathing for so many years, I'm so tired of it, I'm just gonna take a break. Right? So, these conditions, once you take them away, whatever it is that they're sustaining is gone. And this applies most importantly in Buddhism to suffering. Right? So when we talk about the Four Noble Truths, suffering has the same nature of being impermanent. Right? It has causes and conditions, and if you take those causes and conditions away, then suffering disappears. It's the same thing. The same principle applies to everything, whether it's physical, whether it's mental. Right? Whatever it is that exists is temporary. It's just sustained by the causes and conditions. So if you change the causes and conditions, then you change what's there. And when we look at this, right, when we look at our lives and we say, okay, well, you know, look at my situation, right, like, I'm fighting with my spouse, right, I'm not doing well at work, right, I'm in the middle of an argument, someone I love just died and I'm grieving, all these things, right, and if we really understand, if we really look at the causes and conditions and understand how temporary they are,